In this video, I'm going to be updating my railway track plan so it can fit in a room that it wasn't designed for. How hard can that be? Okay, well the good news is that I've managed to put this railway back together, which I'm pretty pleased about because, to be honest, I was worried there wasn't going to be room for it. However, there is a bit of a problem because the room that I've put it in is in fact the lounge. If I turn around, you can see here's the rest of the room. It's a nice big room, but unfortunately it's not supposed to have a railway in it, and that's not going to go down very well with the other people in my life. So I need to find somewhere else to put it. And I do have fun somewhere else. Let me show you where that is. Well, this is the room in the house directly above where we were. You can see there's a bit of work going on. I have stripped all the wallpaper, and I'm currently doing a bit of plaster repair over there. But eventually I'll get it all decorated. I'll paint the whole room white, I expect, and put a non-carpet flooring on the floor. And then I'll be able to put the railway up here. Because this room's directly above where we were, I know that the length along that wall, where the window is the same as the length the room downstairs, so the railway will fit along that wall and along here. But it'll be a bit tighter than the room I was previously in. In particular, we can notice that this long length of wall doesn't have a chimney breast in it, like the room that the railway was previously in had. So that means that I'm going to have to make a few changes to the layout. So you can see here in the layout, I planned for a chimney breast, which is why there's this little dog leg here, this little area that's cut out. But because the chimney breast isn't there, I can fill that in. And that means I'll be able to move this edge right up to the wall, and that's going to change some of the curves and some of the aspects of my layout. So I'll show you the effect that's going to have on the computer. So here I am in Third Planet, and this is the software I use for designing my layout. You can see here the frame. It's two sections, this section here and this one down here. And it shows a lot of what's built on the railway already. I've got 8 lanes here in the staging yard. And then up here it goes up a slope. Now what you can't see is the big sort of turnaround here. And that's because I've got it hidden in another layer. But essentially this is the basement layer, and that's all already built, and I'm likely just to leave it alone because I don't really want to have to start ripping everything to bits. Let me show you a few more layers. I think if I turn on the tunnel, there we go, you can see the big turnaround section here, and that's built as well. I'm likely to largely leave that alone for the time being. And then if I turn on the main track, and I'll activate that, and I'll just turn off the staging so things don't get in the way, then that shows you this. Now these 4 lines here, they're also built, and they come up to just about here. It's where it stops. And the next bit I have to build is where this sort of bridge, where 2 tracks go one way and 2 tracks go the other. Before I do that, I want to have a look at what I'm going to do with this extra bit of space I've gained because I don't have to worry about a chimney breast. Now the first thing just to say is if I fill this in, it's going to be even harder to reach because I've got to reach all the way across this diagonal to there. So I've just got to be aware of that. In terms of access, it's going to make things difficult. What I'm thinking of doing is having a look at making this curve here a bit broader, raising up the radius of it. The problem is this inner line here. Going up this long straight, that'll be going up a slope, and up a slope again when I get to the top. And I know that's a tight radius. That's a radius 1 curve. So radius 1 curve also going up a hill. Doesn't sound like a very good idea to me. So I'm going to see if I can make that a bit bigger and bring it round. And that makes me think about what I'm going to do about all the radiuses on this layout. And I think what I'm going to do is consider changing my standard so that my minimum radius is radius 2, not radius 1. The other thing I'm going to look at doing is changing the separation between the tracks. When I first designed this layout, I went with the set track separation in order to be safe and because I knew that I had some radius 1 curves. But what I want to know is if I increase my minimum radius to radius 2, can I then change the track separation to the streamline separation? And I think the difference is streamline tracks are separated by about 27 millimeters, whereas set track they're separated by about 35. So I'll be bringing the parallel tracks closer together. Now this section here is already built, but for reasons I might explain later, I'm not worried about that, and I might end up relaying all of that and changing the turn back eventually. So I'll just leave that as it is, but for the rest of the track, I'm going to see if I can get them a bit closer together. So I need to do some experiments to see if I'm going to get clearance between parallel tracks if they have streamlined spacing and my minimum radius is radius 2 rather than radius 1. Okay, so in order to lay a piece of test track to see how close I can get these curves together, I just made a little jig just to mark the lines. I'm trying to be a bit more precise than I was last time I played around with this sort of thing. So I've got this arm here, little move, and I've measured as precisely as I can the various radiuses. So here at the origin, I've just got a pin drill and just drilled a very small hole and then stuck a little tiny screwdriver through it. So that's nice and tight, so that's not going to wobble. And then I've made holes at various radiuses. So that's 2 to 8 millimeters. So that's minimum radius in N gauge. That's sort of radius 1 if you've got set track. And then here I've got 263.5 millimeters. That's radius 2 in set track, and most locomotives they sort of recommend you have at least that. So that should be my sort of minimum radius on my layout, hopefully. And what I've done, I've just got a tiny little piece of lead from a propelling pencil. I stick through that hole. These holes I've drilled with a pin vise again, and so I can just hold on. If I press it down, there we go. Just to draw a line, draw a circle. Now I can use this as centre lines and just lay some flex track. I mean, obviously this should be a set track second radius anyway, so I don't have any of that. There we go. And then beyond that, I've got 290.5. Now, there is a theory that for streamline, the gap between gap between tracks is, well, it depends. It depends how you work it out. But there's one theory that it's 27 millimeters. So I'm going to see if I can get that to work. So I'll see what sort of clearance I get between rolling stock, whether they sort of knock each other when they go around a tight curve. If there's a gap of 27mm, hopefully that'll be okay. If this doesn't work, I'll have to try again with a slightly larger radius, and that will require relaying the track. So I'll give this one a go. I'll put a track there, and see if I can get coaches to clear each other. So in order to set up this bit of test track, I've got here a piece of flex track. Now this is Code 80, and I've never used Code 80 track before. When I first got track, I got Code 55, and the difference between Code 55 and Code 80, they both have a rail that's the same depth, that's 80 thousandths of an inch. But the Code 55 has its track embedded in the sleeper, whereas the Code 80 has the rails on top of the sleepers. And I think one of the consequences of that is that Code 80 is a bit more flexible, and I think it's probably happier to hold its shape. It doesn't sort of spring back so much. With Code 55, I could never do that, what I'm doing there. So that looks quite comfortable. I think actually laying Code 80 track must be an awful lot easier than Code 55. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Code 80 on all the hidden parts of my layout, because it's just be so much easier to lay the track, particularly on tight curves. If you want to see me trying to lay a minimum radius piece of Code 55 track and join them together, then I got a video on that. I'll put a link in. I did manage to sort of get it done, but I think, to be honest, it was more an exercise in me learning some skills from track laying rather than something that I'd want to actually do. I think I'll probably want to relay that bit of track. Right, I'm going to try and glue this down and see if I can get it sort of drilled in right. Okay, so there we go. So I finished, I've just pinned down the track, but that's no good because while the pins are there, I can't put any rolling stock on. But at least it's in a nice circle. I've got the holes in the right places on the line. I'll now go and get some Copydex and we'll just glue this piece of track down. Now a tip with this is to mark where the pinholes are, and the reason is once I slap Copydex everywhere, I won't be able to see the holes or the centre line. So I'm not worried about not being able to see the centre line because the holes will keep the track in place. But I need to be able to find the holes again. So you just mark them. I know this is just a little sort of test, it's a little experiment. But This is the technique I've adopted for laying all my track now. So I can lift up the track, pop some Copydex on. The reason I'm using Copydex is, well, because Chadwick Charlie tells me to use Copydex. It's as simple as that. I could probably use PVA or something, and it would probably work just as well. But actually the real reason is that it's sort of rubbery, it's latex based, and although it does hold the track, it does allow you to sort of rip the track up again. And obviously I want to be able to reuse this piece of track. So hopefully I'll get this in place. Yeah, so hopefully I will be able to have another go. I'll get this track up without damaging it once I've finished. And this is the trouble, you've now got to play hunt the hole. There we go. Although I can't see the holes, if I just poke around, eventually I can get it in. And of course, if the pin's in the right place, the pin will then pull the track into the right place, because these mat pins, the base on them is exactly the right size to fit in between the rails. Now, in fact, the pins are holding it nice and tight. So normally I use MDF as my sub-rope bed. This just so happens this is a piece of HDF, a sort of 3mm hardboard, and it's a lot harder. And actually it holds the pins really tightly. So in fact, I don't think I'm even going to need to have anything to weigh down the track, because I think the pins are going to hold it nice and tight. All I want to do is just make sure that at one point, sort of in the middle somewhere, I've got a nice, smooth, perfect curve. And then I can use that to compare with the one outside of it. Anyway, I will wait for that to go off. Well, it's the next morning, so time to take the pins out. These pins are very stiff. Okay, so it's the next morning, and as you can see, the glue's gone off, the track's set in place, so I can do a few tests with some rolling stock. Now, the reason you have this problem with tight curves curves being too close to each other is that as a piece of rolling stock goes around the edge, around the curve, the middle of it will tend towards the inside. It will cut the curve. Excuse me, it will cut the curve. and the ends, the outside, the bit beyond the bogie, will tend towards the outside. And where they pass each other on parallel tracks, there's a risk that the furthest out, the outmost corner there, can strike the middle of the next one here. But actually you can see there, they go by without knocking each other. So this is a good thing. This is a good thing. I've got here a couple of locomotives as well. Now the locomotives are a bit tricky, particularly these steam ones, where there's a pony truck. That's the two small wheels at the beginning, at the front of the driving wheels, because they typically slide from side to side, and they do that because the front overhangs can overhang quite a lot. And I think actually probably the piece of rolling stock I've got that's going to have the biggest overhang is a locomotive like this on this corner. So what I want to see is whether I can get a coach past it there, and I can. It's not knocking, but that is incredibly close. That's probably a millimetre away. Now there is a bit of play in the locomotive, depending on, you see, if I give it a bit of a twist, it could be like that, and there's 3 millimetres of clearance, or it could be like that, and there's barely half a millimetre of clearance, but it does clear. So what this tells me is that 27 millimetres track separation shouldn't cause the rolling stock to foul, even on the tightest possible curve that I'm planning on in this way. It doesn't look great. I'll show you. There's a couple of coaches, and you see as it goes by, it sort of just doesn't look right. But I'm not planning on having many curves like this actually in the scenic area. But what I want to know is that if it disappears into a tunnel and then makes a quick turn, it's not going to knock into something else. It's not going to foul. So there we go. So let me try and get a bit closer and show you just how tight this clearance is. So here you can see right on this curve it's extremely tight, but it's not touching, and that's what matters. Okay, so having established what my new standards are, I've updated my track plan. Let me show you some of the changes that I've made. So the first thing is that, as I just showed you, I've updated my sort of clearance standard. So the two track mainline going around here is a lot closer together. It's 27 millimeters spacing rather than 35. I've used that along with the larger minimum radius to change this curve around the top here. So you'll see that's that inside curve is now 263.5 millimeters. That's radius 2, and then the outside curve beyond it, that's the 290.5. So that curve, both those curves are what we just tested with that little experiment. And because it's slightly larger, it takes up more space, so it goes over the edge of the framework, but that's fine because we've got this extra space here that was previously lost to a chimney breast. So that's good. I've also made a change to this. You see this track here along the top. This is a much higher level. There'll be a helix that brings it up to this level, but obviously it did a sort of dog leg to avoid the chimney breast. That can now just carry along straight, and the advantage of that is that it means that I can just slightly change the track here. This is obviously a bridge going over, so these two tracks going over a bridge that goes over these two, and it sort of shifts the bridge just to the left a bit and a bit up, and in particular away from this crossing. So there was a bit of an issue that this crossing was going to be slightly on the bridge. And the problem with having a crossing on the bridge is, you can see there, I've marked that square where the point motor needs to go. The point motor obviously hangs underneath the track, and that'll look a bit silly if if it's sort of in the bridge. So the bridge will be here, and the point motor won't be in the way. So here's the original plan. You can see this is where the point motor would have gone. But another one of the things that has helped is, because I've reduced my track spacing, this crossover here doesn't need to have this extra little bit of length. So obviously that's moved the junction along to the right just a little bit as well. So that's helped too. I've also made some changes to this crossover here. Now, the original crossover used Y points, and in fact, I think I've got a copy of it over here. Here you go. This is the original bit of track that I've removed. You see, these are 2 Y points. Now, the problem is that the diamond crossing here, I think, has a 20-degree angle. I think that's right. And the Y crossing, let me actually work this out. Let me ungroup all of that. Ungroup. Now, what's the frog on this diamond? The frog is 20 degrees, and the frog on the Y is 5 degrees. Now, it's 5 degrees in both directions, so that means that one route turns 5 degrees to the left and the other turns 5 degrees to the right. So I've got one point turning 5 degrees one way, and the other point is turning 5 degrees the other way. So that means they're converging by 10 degrees. But when we come to the short crossing, it's actually a 20-degree crossing. And one of the issues of that is that we have to have these really tight curves here to turn the extra 5 degrees. These are really short, and so it's a pretty tight radius. But because it's a short length of track, it's been almost impossible to build and to get that piece of track to keep its curve. So that's bound to end up in a kink. Now, I think Peco do have a 10-degree crossing. Let's just have a look. Track and scale. Peco. Do they have a long crossing? Long crossing. There you go. And if we have a look at that, you'll see that's got a 10-degree frog angle. So that will work nicely. If we took some Y points, you can stick one on there and stick the other on there. And you see we've ended up with 2 parallel tracks. However, the issue is that is that bit longer. Let me just group those and rotate them. Group. And then rotate freehand. Let's just whiz it around. So you can see that is that bit longer. And I didn't want to take up that much space. This works a little bit better, in particular in terms of the track spacing. You see the 2 tracks are closer together there. This is my old track spacing, where they're 35 millimeters apart, whereas I think this is going to end up closer to the streamline track spacing. So that looks nice. But the other problem, not only is it longer, but also by the time we've come out the crossing, and obviously I've got to add an extra track on either side there. By the time we come out, we've only turned by 5 degrees and not 10 in each direction. So the whole thing's sort of stopping me from making a bigger turn. So instead, I've gone for this arrangement. So I've got a left hand and a right hand point. Now these are Are they there? There you go. It's a small turnout, and they've got a 12-degree frog, which is more than the 10 degrees I need. Now, what I can do is I can put them going straight into a 20-degree frog crossing. So that's good. But what it means is they're slightly converging. They're converging towards each other by 4 degrees. So they're not coming out parallel. But that's not a problem because I'm not looking for parallel tracks necessarily because it goes straight into this curve. So they're converging, but they're slightly further apart than I want them to be. And what I can do is I can just resolve that inconsistency through these curves. So by the time we get to this point here, I've got the spacing that I want, and it's all nice and smooth. So I'm much happier with this arrangement. It looks nice. Just so you can see another sort of little point here, because this is my new track spacing. Obviously, it doesn't join up. Luckily, I haven't actually laid these two tracks all the way to the end, so it'll be no problem just to adapt this curve to bring them a bit closer together. I've made a few other changes here. I've just straightened this out. That's straight, curve, straight. The reason I've done that is because I got a bit of an eye to the future. Now you might have noticed there's more track down here. What I've actually done is I've got a bit of a long-term plan to move the layout either into a 20-foot shipping container or into a shed or some other sort of building that has the internal dimensions of a 20-foot shipping container. So the idea is that maybe one day I'll put it in a shipping container, and then I can take it with me a lot easier whenever I move house. And that will give me more space. And in fact, I've drawn in here the dimensions of a shipping container. You see, I've got the external and internal dimensions, assuming I give it some insulation and so on. So I've now got a size for my internal space. So while I'm currently just working, with this section here at the top and down the side to the left, and I'm in a room that won't allow me this full length, I've got a bit of a mind to extending it. Now you'll see here I've drawn in this fiddle yard. I designed a lot of that fiddle yard on a live stream. You can go and have a look at it. I might put a link in for it. So the idea is I've got a nice big yard that I can use for sorting, and I have a sort of a maintenance area and all sorts. It's even got a Y here, so I can turn engines around. So I'm sort of really pleased with this. It's got two arrival and departure tracks. It's got, what's it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What do you call them? I don't know what you call them, but tracks for sorting. There's a little bit of there's a sort of head shunt here, so you can have a little run around in those two. It's got this yard lead here that comes along that one there, and the yard lead also forms part of the Y. Anyway, blah blah blah. But so that's the future hope. I'm sure that'll change before I get around to building it. But what I'm planning to do is sort of squeeze it in here. So this bit of track here will need to change if I ever add this section. And in fact, I've done a bit of sort of planning. So if I just add one layer and remove another. So this is how I'll join it in. It'll sort of go over a bridge, or it'll go under a bridge. Not quite sure which way. Perhaps it goes under a bridge and then whizzes around, and then on the way back it'll then join in. And I've worked out all the grades for that and so on, so it all works. So I'm not too worried about the shape of the track for this sort of pre-extension piece, because the hope is that that'll be temporary and one day I'll be able to add the full track. The other thing having the full extension will allow me to do is obviously to move, the end of this section all the way up here, and that'll give me a much longer run of this 4-track piece, which is sort of one of the big features of the layout, one of the things I wanted to achieve. But it does mean that these 4 tracks will all end up being sort of relayed somehow. So I'm not too bothered about the spacing of this whole section, because it'll all get redone. The other thing that'll probably get redone is I'll make some changes to this turnback. In particular, it contains a whole bunch of first radius curves, and while trains do go round those curves, I think my new standard is not to have them. So I'm going to try and find a different way of turning trains around, and also giving an option to sort of dive off at that point and go down into the storage area underneath. So this is all really exciting for me. I've updated my track plan. I've got a whole bunch of work to do. I know what I'm doing, and I'm going to get to work and do some more building and make some more videos. So I hope you'll join me in the future. I think the next thing I'm going to be doing is building these curves and this diamond crossing sort of area, and also the this bridge, and the ones that go up around the top here. Once I've got that built, then I'll be able to connect up the whole loop, and then run trains all the way around. So I'm actually not that far away from having a full scenic circuit, and that's what I'm going to be focusing on achieving. Okay, well that's all for today. I think I'm going to end up with a better track plan, and hopefully I'll soon be able to move in the railway up into its new room. I'll see you in the next video.